Welcome everyone to another episode of Data Dialogues, where we interview leaders in the community. Today we are super lucky to have with us Jessica Talisman. Jessica is an information architect at Amazon. Jessica, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Very excited to chat. Would sort of obviously love to get into what your background is. Seeing you have a lot of experience and you've sort of really been moving in between information architect and sort of taxonomy roles. So, would love to kind of understand a little bit of your background, how you got to do what you're doing, and sort of where things lie today.
Sure. I really started in the library and information science field. I have a background in an undergraduate degree from Smith College in history. I actually thought I was going to get a PhD and become a historian. But soon after I graduated, I was involved. My first job was with the Steven Spielberg project as a video history cataloger. And that really launched me in a direction towards information science and libraries. I did tons of projects without my graduate degree until I saw that it was necessary and I wanted to dive deeper. So I pursued and started becoming involved with technology type projects as a freelance contributor, working specifically in organizing large enterprise information architecture type systems that included taxonomies, ontologies, thesauri, knowledge graphs. And so that led me to my first my first real position, which was still, I guess, not completely in technology, but I had the pleasure of being an art college librarian for a couple of years that led into, positions with companies like Overstock and the Department of Justice and, a wide array of companies. Pluralsight, some people may have heard of Pluralsight. I'm currently with Amazon, and I'm really enjoying it.
Amazing. How did you, end up at Amazon? How did that happen?
I was working at an ad tech company called System One, and the opportunity, I actually was laid off as a result of, I was a senior manager of information architecture at System One. And with the economy and the whole landscape of ad tech changing pretty rapidly, it was almost a blessing in disguise. It was almost immediately that I started the process of interviewing with Amazon. The perfect opportunity presented itself. And it was through someone that I know within the information space who recommended me, reached out to me and saw that I was looking for work and thought I would be perfect for the role at Amazon. So I pursued it and started, I think it was like a matter of 2 months between jobs that I ended up working or starting with Amazon.
Wow. That's a really, I love that story. Do you believe in everything happens for a reason?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I will be completely honest because I don't think I was very happy where I was working, mostly because especially within the data world, most people have their battle wounds and their war stories. And it really takes patience, and it is worth waiting to find the right fit, because it is not only like synchronizing your skill sets as much as also a place that's going to allow you and support you in growth and development, personal growth and development. And that started becoming abundantly clear to me, and something that I wanted to prioritize in whatever role I found.
What does day-to-day look like at Amazon? And what really are you very passionate about what you do?
I was nervous about going to Amazon because a lot of people have their opinions or preconceived notions about Amazon being a grind. And yes, we all do work hard, but it's a very global culture. And it really is what you make it. That's really what Amazon's about. There's a lot of autonomy and independence. And so it's left up to you how you navigate and make connections. It's about human connection at Amazon. So when you want to get something done, when you want to have a project launched, when you're looking at integrating with different stacks and including different stakeholders to reach like goals and to seek opportunities, it's really interfacing and connecting with people to form relationships and to create your own agreements. You're left to your own devices. So myself, like if I, day to day, I usually take care and have pretty quiet time in the morning so that I can get some work done and focus. And I think that's really, really important to set intentions for the day, and to be prepared for meetings and being thoughtful about how you're approaching your work. And then scheduling meetings throughout. There is the reality because, for example, my team, most of the people I work with are in Costa Rica, Barcelona throughout the day, UK, India. So it is also stretching yourself and balancing your schedule to make yourself available for those people, for those individuals, for those stakeholders and those partners.
So the obvious question is all of this built on top of AWS infrastructure? Are you using, these sort of Amazon cloud and those individual sort of components to go build all of this?
We use Amazon. We obviously use AWS, and which is nice. I've never been in an environment, it's just at the ready and it's super reliable. Obviously, we have a lot of internal tooling that's not available to the
Yeah.
public. So there are internal tools. So it's a combination of the two. You see vendor tools, but not as much. And the infrastructure obviously is very reliable, especially sitting so close. So we do have small partnerships sometimes with AWS folks, but in terms of like spinning up clusters and being able to get things quickly into production, it's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah. And we are a data and analytics show. So in terms of the data and reporting which you use in order to go track all of the different documents and all of these different sort of help desks all over the world, Japan, like you mentioned, sort of South Africa. What does the reporting look like? Are you using a data warehouse? What do you use as your BI layer? How does this work?
We do. QuickSight, as you could probably guess. So, we have QuickSight dashboards. We also use OpenSearch, which is helpful for just monitoring and reporting on basically what your stack is doing. So it's a combination of the two, and using them for different use cases. So that's mostly what I use day to day, which I really like.
Nice. And this makes a lot of sense, right? Using Amazon's strengths, sort of obviously.
Yeah.
Are you also using Redshift as a data warehouse?
Yes, we do use all of those, but it's the first time that I've never really sat very close with data analytics teams. And so we liaise with them. But what I find that's super interesting, at least in my side of Amazon, is, I'm working with basically a team of program managers. And, people have different skill sets and different focuses, but it's really about executing. So, the teams are very focused and centralized around, for example, root cause analysis. That would be one team's focus. And so you really power up with skill sets and collaborate with those within your field. It's the first time I've worked in an environment where my team's not so mixed, but you're in a collection of teams that cooperate and work together. There's a lot of collaboration across teams. So it has kind of like a hive mind. It almost feels like a beehive. I think that's a good way to describe it, where you have really heated, concentrated activity because you're pulling a lot of those data engineers or BI folk together. And so they can produce, for example, whatever their goals and objectives are, and their tasks are, their focal points are, that stays very focused. And I think it's an interesting model because I see it generating a lot of a lot more, it really inspires thought in a way that I never really have seen before. And really growth mindset, because
Yeah.
people's domain expertise is really, really supported and respected.
And how does, you have had the opportunity of wearing many roles before this. You were at Overstock, you were at some other sort of larger companies, some smaller companies.
Hmm.
How does, in general,
Hmm.
the bridge between, you know, information architecture, taxonomy, and the data and analytics world, what does that bridge look like at some of these other companies which potentially are not, built on the AWS stack, both in terms of what
Yep.
stacks have you seen before, and then also,
Uh,
on the aspect of how have you been working with your data and analytics counterparts?
yeah. Um, I think it's the first time that I'm not working, at where I am right now, that I'm not working as closely day to day with data analytics, data engineering, data science. I do have partnerships with Amazon Science, for some of my projects. So it's really up to you to reach out to those teams, or those little clusters, to partner with them. Now, for example, some of the other stacks that I've observed at these other companies, most all companies will have AWS as their primary stack, but split and have a little bit of Azure. So like if you think of a pie slice, like 30% Azure, the rest, being AWS, which I think is pretty interesting, which can sometimes create some inconsistencies. And, most of the reasons for doing that are because certain tools are better or more accessible, or there's a vendor that says, we will give you this product, but only if you know, um, it's this price, like a less of a price if you go with Azure. Or, oftentimes there's a machine learning team that has a tool that they've chosen to go on Azure, which forces you to also have to be on Azure for a tool that's very dependent on. Um, but in terms of reliability and site reliability and consistency, for the most part, the types of tools within the spaces that I work, like especially if it's like a semantic middleware tool that might interoperate with something that analytics or data science or like a warehouse is working with, um, those tools tend to be on AWS, and mostly because of
Gotcha.
predictable pricing. Yeah,
And have
yeah,
you seen, you sort of mentioned Azure, that's the third biggest cloud actually, sort of GCP
yeah.
is the second after AWS. Do you see sort of have you seen GCP involved in like some of these conversations in like previous companies?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, and especially this there there one of the companies I worked for had GCP, but was moving off of, like, especially if you use tools obviously like Looker, um, certain BI tools, certain machine learning tools, you'll have to be on GCP. But especially also if a company chooses to have like enterprise drive, like work drive, um, it- I see a lot of companies also just using GCP because um, of certain AI tools that they can integrate with spreadsheets. That is something that I see that is very common. Um, so
Mm.
for those maybe that aren't as, you see it a lot in marketing, actually, advertising, ad tech. You do see a lot of GCP because it's low fidelity from a front end perspective, that you can integrate those
Mm.
tools, and the ability to auto save your work and share, and easy integrations from the front end without having to do too much technical work.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And how do you see this whole, it makes sense that, we have these three big clouds and, sort of
Hmm.
AWS has got Redshift and it's
Hmm.
got a few other sort of tools. It's got Glue to move stuff over. You mentioned QuickSight. So GCP obviously has got BigQuery and it's got Looker
Yep.
Studio and Looker.
Yep.
We have Azure with sort of Synapse and now with Fabric and so
Yeah.
we have the big clouds, but there's been this whole what was previously called the modern data stack, which with a whole set of other technologies, which basically gave birth to the snowflakes and the Databricks and the
Yep.
Fivetrans and the DBTs and the Sigmas, and
Hmm.
this entire massive ecosystem, which has
Yep.
become quite sizable if you sort of compound all of them together and sort of consider them a cloud. Obviously they're deployed back into one of these three clouds, but if they're not natively available inside these clouds, how is these sort of alternate approaches to data and analytics? What's been your opinion
Hmm.
on sort of these tools?
I personally have like a great appreciation. I'm not going to do a plug, I promise, but obviously, I I appreciate a lot of these really focused products where
Yeah,
you aren't necessarily on a proprietary cloud because of the tools, but you choose the tools because they are more performant and get the job done. And so I do think that there's convenience and there's forward thinking planning where you are choosing the right tools to construct your stack, and you happen to use, for example, AWS as your chosen provider. That might be an
yeah,
approach. Most companies I've worked with, especially ones, most everyone except for my last role in ad tech, it was really focused on optimizing with the best tools and assembling the most performant stack possible in order to derive analytics. Analytics is essential
yeah,
because it justifies everything you do, everything you do. And so, obviously it's my choice. It's like, I guess a good way to explain it is you have your cloud, you have your chosen working tools. Like, your alias is through Gmail, say, it's your company's address, but there's an enterprise Gmail. And so then you afford, because you engage with that, then you can afford the ancillary tools that make sense on that sort of surface area. But the things that substantiate the business, and actually drive the business to derive those meaningful analytics, like Databricks, like Fivetran, um, those Snowflake. I mean, I haven't been at a company that does not have Snowflake. That's just a fact. Um,
yeah,
there's, it's a choice. And so those more important, I think that a lot of companies, get split where, say they had Oracle DB, just as an example, or they had, some sort of Postgres database, and they want to move to a different system. They feel like it's clunky, costs too much money. It costs, it's too large, it lags. And so the obvious choice is to move to Snowflake. And so you end up sort of split or fractured. I see that a lot. Half of the business, or is on Oracle because that's legacy, and pulling yourself off of that legacy system into something like Snowflake, obviously is difficult. The problem is that I also see a lot where Snowflake, and I'm just saying this is like the word on the street, less reliable. And not reliable in terms of
yeah,
performance, but just in terms of, um, you know, would you productionize out of Snowflake? A lot of companies
yeah.
would say no, right? So it's a
Got it.
choice.
And how does this affect in terms of being able to attract the best quality people? And what I mean by that is, you might have data engineers today who are like, we want to build on Snowflake. That's really where the industry is going. And you have analytics engineers. And so DBT became pretty like synonymous with like data
Yep.
modeling. And then all of a sudden you
Yep.
had analytics engineers, which, some ways were the newer title after analyst. And,
Yes.
I know people who found it difficult to hire, analysts being like, if I'm not working on DBT, I'm going to be left behind in the industry. So, how does, someone like sort of Amazon or GCP or Azure go look at this? Because they don't have those tools out of the box, but, obviously there's still hundreds of thousands of people sort of in these companies and working on a
Yep.
different tool base.
Yeah. I mean, like, if you think of it from an abstract level, you're saying specifically with like GCP or with a company that's already on, say, AWS as, using that as their cloud provider. And these tools, I mean, if you're paying to be on AWS no matter what, you're still a customer, for example, of AWS. So
Yeah.
in terms of skill sets and actual tooling, I think my experience also being at Pluralsight, because it teaches technology, that's the whole lens of that company, the whole purpose. And I think it's important to have people that are experts in tools, but if you're an analyst and you're hired into a company specifically because you're an expert in a tool, but you're an analyst, what happens if that tool changes? The fundamental practice of being an architect, of being an engineer, of being an analyst, is the fundamental practice. The tooling, the capacity to learn the tool is something different. Hiring someone for the tool, if you're at a point where you're hiring an expert simply for the tool, I hope that person also has the skill set in the background to understand the domain as well. I do believe
Yeah.
in tool agnostic practices. Like when I go into an organization, when I'm interviewing, or I'm looking at an organization, I want to know what tools they have. Are there tools? If I'm interested in a tool, what does that process look like? Are there funds to get the tools I need? Because we all need tools to do our job. I certainly it's a big red flag for me when I ask if there's a tool at a company and they say, no, we're building out of spreadsheets. That should obviously be
Yeah.
a big red flag. I've been promised tools before and gotten into my seat and been told, no, I'm sorry, we can't get you a tool budget. So
Yeah.
it's a weird, tricky balance. I think the kindest and best thing a company can do is hire people for growth, hire people that have the skill sets, that have the analytic skills, have the engineering skills, hire those people. If they need to be upskilled, support your people. Agreements with companies can be great. A lot of times companies offer educational components and learning as part of the contracts. That can happen. A lot of companies have enterprise licenses with companies like Pluralsight, where I worked, where on the back end, then, within your local environment, you're given access to some sort of educational technology that allows you to upskill, because the industry is moving so fast. That tool is going to change. That tool is also growing. The people that work at DBT are upskilling as well. So why wouldn't you upskill? Because they're going to be launching new
Yeah.
features, new functions. There's going to be new products. It's a changing landscape. And so getting really, really fixed on that one tool is going to paint you into a corner.
I love that answer. What I, love is don't get attached too much to one tool, and as an employer, learn to hire on the fundamentals instead of looking for
Mm-hmm.
one tool specialized
Yep.
folks. So as you think about the information architecture space and being the bridge in some ways between the business and the what the business wants to do and the technology function, where is the space evolving and moving to in the next few years? How does AI, the question on everyone's mind is, how does AI in some ways, what's AI doing to the space, and how is this going to be any different? And in the future, instead of having an information architect, is an AI going to go architect a system, and sort of none of this is going to
Yep.
matter because that inference layer is now part of a computer's brain. So we'd love to hear
Yep.
your thoughts on where we're heading.
Yeah. I've been thinking a lot. I don't know why that movie Weird Science comes into my mind these days, but there's a requirement. AI, or a large language model, is simply a statistical model. The base architecture, how you define your space, is fundamental to AI serving your business. If you don't know your business, If you can't even define your business, what you do, your nomenclature, how things are structured, how your presentation layer looks, like you can't actually step into that space, sort of, and put those shoes on. That's a problem. The exercise of information architecture is defining that space. It's fundamental that it's almost like a handshake or an introduction with AI, that it's being able to set the stage for AI to be successful. So I do see a lot of companies, a lot of people who think, okay, we can have AI just build these taxonomies. Sure. But is it going to represent your business correctly? How can you trust that? You can train on data, but if your data is not clean, then it's going to be very confusing for AI. An example would be, is it going to know the difference between an acronym and the spelled out word, the actual term? So it's no matter what on either side, if you have AI develop your taxonomy or a hierarchy, which it doesn't do very well, just as an example, because most information systems are reliant on taxonomies or hierarchies for classification structures. If you rely on that, then you're still going to have the task of cleaning that up on the other side, no matter what. And it may still be incomplete. So where we try to sort of relinquish ourselves from certain tasks, that's the beauty of AI, is not having to do certain tasks, not having to hire for certain tasks. Then, and it's a little bit like saying, I don't care. There has to be a human in the loop, in order to make sure that things are being driven correctly. Setting something free like AI into a system is very, very risky, as we've seen. There's been lots of examples, and even companies that have hit financial hardship because of over-reliance on AI and trusting too much. So, I think it's to be, I think the most important thing is to set up your framework, and information architecture is part of that. And to be able to build your architecture like it's your fingerprint, your company's fingerprint, it's your brand, it's your identity, it's how you want information to be identified, processed. It's you're telling AI with something like a taxonomy, this is what I care about. These are the topics that are most important to me. These are the orders of operation. And this is how we communicate that data throughout the organization. Without that, it's going to be meaningless. So it's the most important thing,
Thank you.
as the first, yeah.
So, what I hear is like mapping this back to the data layer. In the data layer, you have the semantic layer, which is really telling a business, what is your definition of actual MRR, or what is your definition of active users. Before that, it's just sort of data, right? And that can be interpreted in many ways. What I hear is, what information architecture and taxonomy is to software engineering is the semantic layer to what is sort of data engineering. And, AI is sort of relevant across both, but really the bridge for AI is really the sort of taxonomy layer in software engineering and the semantic layer in data engineering.
And the semantic layer being that's something that's interesting. I'm not sure how, for example, I've heard semantic layer being like, okay, you have schema fields. That's the semantic layer. You have named schema fields, and it's clean, and those names for those schema fields are defined. Well, yeah, sure, that's one semantic layer. You can even think of that as like an ontology type layer, or a schema-based layer, or a metadata layer. There's layers to metadata, right? So the semantic layer is, yeah, exactly. And so being able to define and reconcile that, makes it conversational, and it also makes us intimate with what we're really looking for in our analytics and in our engineering, becoming very intimate with that, rather than thinking of it as, I think of it like, a factory type system. A lot of us do go to work and we just know the job to be done. We know the tool that we use. We punch the clock, or it's like a drill test being on a factory or an assembly line. But I think that the beauty of it is actually being more engaged and more involved with the process rather than passive. It's an active.
Got it. That makes a ton of sense. I know we are running out of time. We normally um,
Hmm.
do a sort of quick fire round of questions. Would love to get your view on a few
Yeah.
different topics. Um, for anyone who is looking to enter the information technology field, what advice would you give?
Oh, interesting. I think it's more than UX. So it's pretty holistic and it's becoming familiar with lots of different systems, understanding some about SQL with Postgres, understanding analytics techniques, having familiarity with the landscape of tools, and understanding that, the different use cases and opportunities for tools. Knowing that I think one of the most critical things that I see right now is content analysis and coverage models. That's something that has not been talked about. So really understanding what content models, domain models, and coverage models look like.
Awesome. Is there any one tool in the data analytics space which you are tracking or you think is going to be revolutionary either now or down the road?
Geez, I do think that Snowflake is still a pretty strong contender. Um, I see that tool possibly developing a little bit more DBT for sure. Um, I think that's pretty interesting. I'm really impressed actually with QuickSight, to be honest. It's the first time that I've really delved into it pretty deep. And in terms of like observability, looking at OpenSearch. And I know I'm plugging Amazon tools, but those are all pretty interesting.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Uh, any particular job title which you think, data engineer, data analyst, ML, architect, any of these job titles which you're really bullish on in 2024 and onwards?
Yeah, I think an ML or an AI analytics type roles. I think we're going to start seeing more of those. Being able to, AI analytics, AI engineer. I think it's really like when we look at site reliability, I'm interested to see if we're going to start to see AI reliability engineers that segue or sort of liaise or intersect with information architects. As we're seeing more issues with reliability for AI, I think we're going to have to, just like you have SREs, um, and analytic positions around that, I think that there's going to be a little bit of a move towards having those reliability engineers, specifically in the AI space.
Gotcha. And one last question. I try to end in a difficult question. Do you ever see
Oh gosh,
yourself start a company in the future?
I
And if
do
so, in what space
actually.
do you think it would be?
Oof. Um, I see a gap, and I do see myself offering, and possibly I've kicked around the idea of starting a company in the taxonomy ontology space that makes a really, the idea of creating a friendlier entry point for taxonomy, and ontology, and being able, that's less complex. A lot of the tools tend to be pretty heavy. So I do see, and I play around, and I have through some open source tools that I've developed somewhat of a stack for myself that works really, really well. That includes about 8 different clustering algorithms. So I do, it's a dream of mine. I think most of us have those dreams. And more than anything, I've started writing a book. So that's pretty exciting. Yeah.
Incredible. When is your book going to be out?
Well, I haven't gone there yet. So like as far as that, but we'll see. We'll see what direction, because I've been talking to publishers.
Nice.
So yeah.
Uh, well, Jessica, thank you so
Yeah.
much for being on the show. It was such a pleasure to chat. Thank you for the wisdom,
Thank you.
and we hope you have a wonderful time at
Thank
the
you for
retreat which you're just about to go to.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was great being on the show.